Right, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Thank you very much. The music is off. Jerry is serious now. So good morning and welcome to DSET 2024. My name is Tess Butler. I'm the CEO of Ruddy Nice and DSET, and also founder director of Fight Club, which is important as we go through and talk about wargaming later today. So Jerry, can I have my slides, please? Thank you. So we're back again in Bristol. This is our 9th edition of DSET, so big party next year. I will get cake. We have grown enormously over the last 3 years, especially. And can I have, oh, there's a clicker here. I don't even have to say next slide because that's a bit COVID, isn't it? So thank you very much for coming and for your ongoing support and for motivating us to be the best that we can be. We try every year to make this better and better for you and to make it good throughout the entire year and not just this week. We're not just a conference. DSET is all about people, you, collaboration and action. We want to give you this environment so that you have all of that opportunity to create those connections, provide that collaboration and actually action it. We want everybody to get an ROI from their time at DSET within one cycle of DSET. And if that's not happening for you, please come and tell us and we'll try and work out how to make that happen. So we've grown 7 times the size in the last 3 years. We're on track for a record attendance again this year. Now, numbers sometimes don't matter. Quality matters first, but numbers do matter to some of you, especially those of you in industry that need to make contact with your customers. We've now got more than 80 exhibitors and sponsors from 44 countries. Where we're going, it's where we've always been going, but it always hasn't been apparent. Now we can distinctly show all of the different areas that we are working together with and can grow. So we have the Wargaming Conference and Festival starts today. So there's like 15 to 20 games from brilliant experts in wargaming from all around the world. Please go and join in. They would love to have you. A wargaming nerd myself, I will tell you that I would love you to come and play my game. We are expanding into medical, fire and police. We have so many crossovers across our industries, across our deployments and across our work that we want to bring those in. So we have lessons learned from each of us. We have the College of Policing in this week with their war game as well. So please go and talk to them. They're in on Thursday. We are a safe place and a welcoming place and a place to bring more people in and engage directly, which is why we have the Defence Women's Action Board. We are creating an overall organisation called Women in Security, Defence and Medicine. And for that, we have engaged several Ukrainian women who are still in Kharkiv to do all of our branding, our music, and all of our support in the background. And we'll be launching that this evening after DSET, where you are all welcome to come and get drinks and cocktails and war game and learn a bit more about that. We also have the amazing Antarctic Fire Angels who are going to do a fireside chat. They've just skied unaided to the South Pole, a marathon a day, with 100 kilos, dragging their sledge behind them for 52 days, most of it in whiteout. They're amazing women. So we'd love you to come and meet them. And we will also have another bunch of amazing crew who are going to take over as our charity of choice this year, which is the Force Atlantic 24 team, which is a young group of Army females who are rowing across the Atlantic in an 8-meter boat in November. So please come and support them, even if to say you're nuts, but you can do it. We have got the DSET Intern Initiative, which we'll come on to. It's all about bringing in talent, the Stakeholder Day, and the Careers Day. Now, we have stood up a DSET International Committee in the last year, and we've got some subcommittees underneath that. And this is to bring in proper laser focus from each of the communities to help us shape and drive what we're doing here. I have to say, the best team this year was the Next Gen team. Yeah, come on, Next Geners. Absolutely. Do you know what? They delivered to time, the only ones. They put all their panels together first before Christmas. Some people turned up with their presentations this morning. And they asked us to put on a careers fair. So we've done that. And we have got representatives and students and young talent who graduates coming on Thursday from 16 different universities from across the UK and Netherlands. We've had different briefings, so we've got NATO and MSG, and it's really important that we bring all of the communities together in one place so that you've got all of that crossover and you can swap lessons learned and information. And then finally on here, the Serious Game Showcase and Challenge is tripled in 1 year. We are so excited. We've got 15 finalists on the show floor this year. Go and see what they've got. It's really interesting. It's really dynamic. And some of them have been built in a week. And just to show what they can do with the speed and agility and that way of thinking. So Wargaming Week. Wargaming, I never thought as a wargaming nerd that wargaming would become sexy. But it is one of the buzzwords at the moment whenever it goes, oh, we've got a war game. And I'm like, are you sure? As any good wargamer will ask. But it's about our education and training and enabling people to understand what wargaming is, where you can use it, and is it even appropriate in the first place for what you're trying to do? And we want to be the hub for that. We're bringing all of the networks together. We've got representations here from the Women in Wargaming group in the US, the UK, Connections North, and Fight Club as well. So please go in and see them all. We're here for the week, and it's about bringing all of those viewpoints together in one space, which, you know, wargamers are not afraid of being a little bit contentious as well. So that should be fun. So this brings me on to the bit where I've said I'm not going to cry. There's a gentleman called Peter Pearce. He is known as the father of modern wargaming. And he wrote a wonderful book called The Art of Wargaming. Now, Peter and I have talked over the years, and last year he said, do you know what, Tess, I'm going to come and keynote the Wargaming Week in Bristol this year. Sadly, he hasn't made it. He passed away in March. So we are announcing, in conjunction with his family, his wife Joanne has been amazing, we are launching the Peter Pearce Scholarship from the Wargaming Week. And we will be running this out of Ruddy Nice and in conjunction with Fight Club and the rest of the Wargaming Weeks to enable younger talent to actually benefit from his wisdom and what he's passed to us. Now, one of his very dear friends, Dr. John Curry, I don't know if you're in the room, John. He will be here this week. He's probably in the wargaming room setting up his war games. He edited Peter's book, and he is the most prolific writer of professional wargaming books. So we have set John up this week. We have bought a load of his books, and he's going to be doing a book signing today. So if you'd like one of his books and meet John, who's one of the other legends in this space, then please go through there. What we'd like you to do, though, is to do a small donation to the Force Atlantic 24 team. There'll be a QR code or a bucket, chuck in a tenner, and this will also enable them to raise awareness. But John will be speaking about Peter as we go through the week, and there will be more information on Peter and the scholarship as we go through this week. I'm just going to read one tiny passage from Peter's book. At the end of his book, he talks about what of the future and what of the future of wargaming. It's like, where does this path lead? But even more importantly, where should it lead? Now, this was written in 2011, and this will give you some context. Part 1 showed that both hobby wargaming and professional wargaming stand poised on the brink of another serious downturn in their stature and popularity, or how that has changed in a decade. Part 2 outlined some guiding principles of wargaming in the hopes of helping both hobby and professional wargamers reverse that trend and at last smooth out the up and down cycle that has plagued wargaming for so long. The time seems ripe. Never before have wargamers enjoyed such a wide variety of powerful and effective tools and techniques. Yet never before has such an overabundance of technology so threatened to fragment the community of wargamers and frustrate their fondest hopes. Wargaming's delicate balance once again threatens to topple. So we're hoping to make sure that it doesn't topple and to make sure that it is an ongoing and enduring capability that we can all make use of. But you get some flavor there, and Peter was always excited about the next thing, and that we hope you will be too. So to come on to the keynote session, we have got 4 wonderful speakers here today. We are in an election in the UK, for those of you watching online, and so we have some rules that have been given us for engagement this week. Because we're in Purda, it means that no direct questions can be asked of UK government and military. You can ask your chair direct questions. You can ask any other panelists direct questions. I will invite those from the UK to comment at the end, should they so wish, but they will not be answering directly the question. Do we have that clear? You can ask the question, they can comment, should they choose to. And so it's with that in mind that we will now welcome our first speaker up to the stage to join me, and I will chair here. So we are really grateful to Major General Chris Barry for coming here today. In his civvies, actually, he's in disguise, to brief us on where his challenges are and what he believes his future looks like.
Tess, thank you. And good morning, everybody. So Tess is quite right. As a serving military officer, I am bound by PERDA rules, which is a bit like Cinderella, so I can attend, but if I answer the wrong thing, second POS, turn me into a pumpkin or something. And I'm really glad to see so many friends here today, both from industry and from serving community, from Land Warfare Centre, from my allies and partners, and indeed many people who previously served in the Land Warfare Centre. So nice to see you all. And what I want to talk to you this morning about shortly is about the land training system, because land training system is an innovation. It isn't a transformation. It isn't a new piece of kit. It is why we have to train differently and how we are going to train differently. And then I just want to share with you some thoughts about what innovation means to me and how to best enable it. Let me talk to you a little bit about land training system. So in one context, you might reasonably say there's nothing different about this. This is the British Army training itself as individuals, as teams, and then bringing those teams together to build something greater than the sum of its parts. And was it ever thus? But unfortunately, the way that we used to do it, back in the days of the Cold War, no longer work. And why don't they work? And the reason they don't work is because when we were in campaigning in entirety in Iraq and Afghanistan, there were 15,000 decisions made, some very big, like the size of the army, or what fleets we were going to buy, or where we were going to train, or how we were going to structure. And some of them quite small, you might think, whole fleet management, how you design camps, pay as you dine, and so on. But all of them meant that when we came back, the way that we used to train no longer worked. And I just want to bring that to life a little bit. So if you imagine the period of the Cold War, and of course, many of you served during that period, and this will be instantly familiar, we were a large army that was based in Germany in its forward battle positions to deter an aggressive USSR and Cold War and Warsaw Pact, with its fleet, with its training areas, and with its way of fighting. And although the army changed over those 50 years, it was a recognizable change, and it was a cadence of change that was sustainable. So you might delete Chieftain, insert Challenger, or get rid of Bulldog, and actually that didn't happen, but never mind, and insert Warrior. But the point is that you were still fighting the combined arms battle in a way that was recognizable from the end of World War II. So your capability was based upon known units of currency. 4 battle groups make a brigade, 12 make a division, 24 make a corps, 48 make an army group. And that was both resourced and understood and deliverable. The issue is now that the army doesn't look like that at all. And furthermore, as we develop and introduce new systems which are genuinely different, delete CVRT, insert Ajax, or for example, introduce AI support to targeting, or first-person view drone, and, then your way of fighting and your ability to train for that fight necessarily has to change. And then you might add the fact that the complexity of the army is much greater, but it's also smaller. So it's become distilled. And so each constituent part then becomes more difficult to combine with other parts. And then you might consider the fact that the UK population is much more skilled than it used to be. So when this previous training system was designed, then the Army were probably the leaders in the development of any single capability, whether it was a metalsmith or a farrier or indeed a signals engineer. But that again is no longer the case. Industry is moving much faster than we are, and our population is getting much more skilled, and we want to take advantage of those. No, we shouldn't start from a position that every single KSC we need to train from scratch. And then you might go on and say that who we are going to fight with or where we're going to fight is also changing. And in a world of constant competition, the ability to maintain very high levels of readiness whilst also serving a very, very sustained operational demand, which varies from COVID to training team to deployment to Palestine, Gaza, to support to a partner nation. Well, that isn't going to slow down. So that idea that you can sit on your Bergens and train for a fight is also missing. So consequently, we had to look at first principles at how we train the British Army. And land training system is it. And so let me just talk you through these three pillars. So the first pillar is Tradewind. And Tradewind is populating the Army with the knowledge, skills, and behaviours in order to prevail in the 21st century combined arms battle. Knowledge, skills, and behaviours. And what we want to do is we want to offer those involved in that endeavour maximum flexibility about where you get those people from. So, for example, if the requirement is for a systems engineer, then we want to offer the choice that you might recruit that systems engineer direct from the civilian and then give them the appropriate behaviours because they have the skills and competencies already, and then they can take their place in the order of battle. Bit more difficult if you're looking for a sniper. I get that. But it's about a choice. It is allowing the recruiting and basic training engine maximum flexibility to bring the skills in that populate our army. The second thing we want to offer is the maximum amount of choice in how you do that. So not everything has to be a long course based upon the speed of the slowest learner. So much rather, we would rather have a fixed mastery standard and a variable time. And there's this kind of great example from RSME down in Chatham of bricklaying. You come in on day one, if you lay a course of bricks and it's to an appropriate standard, then you can move on. And if you're like me and you can't do anything in a straight line, you'll still be there learning. And you'll then therefore be getting the bulk of the trainer's attention. And then you think of ways in which technology, wargaming or innovative ways of doing competency transfer might be enabled to exploit that to do that faster and faster and faster. So Tradewind, skills, knowledge, behaviours, competencies to populate the 21st century army. That's the pillar. The second pillar is Cyclone, the most important pillar. It is where you bring those to make formed and assured units of currency. So safety, readiness, competency, the building blocks of our army to an assured standard. Now we determine there are 325 building blocks of the British Army. And they vary from a Sabre squadron, tank squadron, right the way through to a field hospital or to a network node or to a watchkeeper deck or to a headquarters. So they're the building blocks of our army. And what we want to do is give them 10 weeks of consolidated training every year. Protected, ring-fenced, vital ground, can't be touched. Now, of course, in time of national crisis, they would be touched. But the point at the moment is that we negotiate with defence and say, you cannot move, you cannot use that building block when it's in its cyclone. Because if you do, we're not declaring them competent, and therefore you wear the safety risk. And that's important in a peacetime army and in a license to operate. So we need time to skill people for a 21st century battle. And if you think how far you can get with 10 weeks in the field, soup to nuts, starting with this is your PPE and this is how you wear it, and ending with this is how you would combine with similar subunits at the entry level to collective training. And if you program it so that your Sabre squadron is near your armoured engineers, near your armoured infantry, near your headquarters, near your echelon, near your support node, near your LAD, then at the end of that combination, they can, of that 10 weeks, they can start to combine and do things that we would recognise from BADIS and elsewhere. So that's Cyclone. That's in place. That's 85% programmed. And then the third element is Storm. How do you build those building blocks together to create something greater than the sum of its parts? And this isn't about battle groups, brigades, divisions, corps. This is about competencies. This is about a recce strike complex that will defeat the Russians. This is about the ability to find at scale, to resource at scale, to set the theatre, to combine with allies, to work with partners, to work in the multi-domain space across all of the levers of government. So they're the competencies we're trying to deliver in Storm. Now, some of those might be delivered in a recognisable exercise, but some of them might not. And as we recapitalise our training engine through CTCP, the aim would be to find the right technologies that give you the maximum competency transfer in the shortest period of time, because this is a race. It is a race to be ready to defeat the enemy. Not the fight we want to have or the fight we choose to have, the fight we might have to have, and we want to win it. So we will do all we need to do in these next months to make sure that we have a training engine that fits the 21st century British Army, and land training system is it. So let me just spend a little bit of time of telling you how we got this far, because this hasn't been done with top-down direction. This hasn't been a missive from ECAB or a direction. This is bottom-up change. This is innovation. This is the British Army looking at itself and using a professional cadre of trainers, much of the KSC is represented in this room, to think, how do we build a model that actually works for the 21st century army? So there are three elements to this, which there are plenty more, but let me just talk to you about three. So the first is understand what is the end you're trying to achieve. That is, you would spend most of your time thinking, what is it we're trying to get to? Not what we used to try to get to, or what we've always done, or what might worked in the past, or what someone else said, or what another army did. What do we, the British Army, need to get to? What is the end state we're after? And there'll be more than just being very, very good at fighting, the best in the world. I mean, that is an end state, but there are other things. The protection of the license to operate. So the requirement to be safe whilst we're doing it. That's important. Because we lose our license to operate to prepare people for the 21st century fight, then we may as well go home. Now, and we can cry into our lager all day long about it. We can talk about, the safety tolerances that were allowed in the past and crown immunity, but it's irrelevant. We've got to be safe. That's an end. So we've also got to be able to modernize. So what worked for CVRT doesn't work for Ajax. We have to understand that. A battle group exercise involving Boxer with one subunit of Boxer, that's what we will have to train. It's not what we might choose to want. We might want it all now, but it's not going to happen. We need to be able to connect with our partners. So it'd be brilliant. We can have the greatest comm system in the world, but if we can't talk to the Estonian brigade that we're working to, again, pointless. So we have to think about the ends. And that conversation probably took the longest and still ongoing, actually. We have to keep going back to that. The second thing is you must look across the current resource base. So everything we have done this far, we have not asked for any extra resource. We haven't asked for more people. We haven't asked for consultancy support. We haven't waited for CTP to deliver change. We haven't done any of that. We've looked across our current contracts, training areas, people, time, space, ammunition, and we felt, okay, what can we change in there? What can you strip out and rebuild in a way that actually works to deliver the end you're trying to do? And then you think, okay, right, fine. Well, we want metrosized live fire. So let's talk to our partners, Saab, Cubic. How would you do it? What do we have to give up in order for us to be able to get data out of our live fire? Very important to us. And they did it. And then that third element of innovation is the communication. It's this constant requirement to talk to everybody about the ends and about the ways. Because in the end, they have to deliver it for you. You can have the world's greatest idea and you can just spend your time wandering around preaching it. And if people are not bought in, it won't happen. It doesn't, you know, you can be a general, you can be a field marshal. It won't change if you don't bring people into the understanding of what is it you're trying to do and what they need to do in order to deliver the outcome. And so spending time talking, listening, consulting, challenging, being challenged yourself. Yes, it's uncomfortable. It's not easy. And being prepared for your thinking to evolve whilst you're delivering the change, I think is the third element to delivering an innovative solution to a 21st century problem. Tess, thanks very much for your time. We really thank you for inviting me, for listening to me, and to be going on first in front of an esteemed audience. It's a great privilege. I look forward to commenting, I think, on any questions I'm allowed to. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. That was great. And we're ahead of time, so we'll have plenty of time for comments. So I'd very much like to welcome a visitor and speaker this morning. It's very important to the community, and it's her first time over with us, so thank you very much. And also really important, obviously, is NATO ally and US. Could you please give us a big welcome for Lea Kirkwood?
Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to take a little bit different approach, but hopefully you guys will see the threads that we're building. So as was said, my name is Lea Kirkwood. I'm a member of the Senior Executive Service, which just means I'm a senior civilian with the US Air Force. I'm an Air Force Program Executive Officer for the Agile Combat Support portfolio. And please bear with me, I don't think these are common acronyms. So I'm basically an acquisition wing commander. I run a portfolio of programs across the Air Force. There's about 15 PEOs that run different portfolios. My portfolio consists of simulators, which is why I'm here, but also automatic test systems for operational, intermediate, backshop, and depot level testers, the entire metrology and calibration industry for the US Air Force and Space Force. Also, human systems, anything that touches the human weapon systems, from uniforms, CBRN, ejection seats, night vision goggles, anything that touches the human. And then also combat avionics, your PNT, position, navigation, and timing, or GPS boxes, your targeting pods, your electronic warfare, and your large aircraft infrared countermeasures, as well as support equipment, all of your aircraft ground equipment on the airfield, and vehicles that are required for a base. So kind of the nice way to say is that, you know, anything that you probably need that's not actually the jet, you know. So, but there's a couple of us out there that have these basket SPOs that manage a lot of different things. Now that said, I'll step you through a few things we're doing in the Air Force. I don't know if some of you guys have heard these already, but we are getting ready to transition a view of our portfolios to better align into where we think we need to be going. Some of those messages you just heard from General Barry. So I want to start off really and just say, so my portfolio, as I mentioned, I'm here because of the simulators. So we have your actual sims, like your weapon system trainers, which are more traditional, like, you know, in a dome or something, wherever you're using that, can be part task trainers. And then also we have the distributed mission operation networks for combat air forces and mobility air forces, or your DMONs. We work a lot of LVC aspects with our research and development lab. And then we also stood up a program of record for our joint simulation environment, or JSE, which started out as the test bed for the F-35. And we're now going to transition it because we think we can get a heck of a lot of really good training out of that system, that environment, and the models that are in that environment to actually give more lifelike training for that jet and for other aircraft. So we're working at developing other models to put into that environment so that we can continue to kind of leverage the technology that we've developed for that aircraft. The Navy is not standing up a program of record, and this is not a joint program of record. However, we each have priority models or entities to put into that environment. And so we are working closely with the Navy, and we are also working to if we're going to do that for ourselves, then how do we do that for our coalition partners as well? So that's all on the list. But as you can see, the portfolio that we lead, or that I lead right now, a lot of things, we have become very good in the United States Air Force at building exquisite stovepiped things. We have exquisite stovepiped major commands. One does air combat very well. One does mobility and tanker ops very well. And one does global strike very well. And a lot of our other component commands as well. But we are not as strong as at horizontally integrating. So one of the things that I've been in PEO ACS for about 5 years. I was the deputy, and then I was acting director, and then I became director. So I've lived this journey for many years, and one of the main things is that we have to figure out how are we going to get better horizontally integrated, and how are we going to leverage more common and enterprise solutions, so that, one of the arguments that we have is, especially now with kind of coming out of COIN and counterinsurgency ops in South Asia, is, okay, well, if we're now looking to the Pacific, we just don't have enough pallet positions to put all of your exquisite support equipment to get it to all these island chains. So what are you going to leave behind? Or can we make you a Swiss Army knife of something that you can use across multi-platforms and across multiple capabilities, so you can maybe reduce the number of actual pieces of equipment? But I think that thread can go through any of the systems that are in my portfolio, and indeed a lot of the acquisitions that we do, all the way up to an aircraft. Can an aircraft be a bus, and you can put any types of payloads and mission sets on it that you want? So I think that we're starting to think through that more in earnest. So when we think about, and I apologize, there's no slides, because that's just one more thing I'd have to get through releasability. But when we think about what we've been talking about in the public sphere since our current Secretary of the Air Force, Frank Kendall, came in, and he's a former acquisition technology and logistics undersecretary as well. So we get no trade space when we brief him, when he knows exactly what our business is, and he's very interested in how we can use our business to further the Air Force and the DoD mission set. But when he came in 2020, he came in, and I apologize, this must be 2021. The first thing he thought about was, where is the threat transitioning to? And so we really pivoted, and we really started looking more in earnest at the Pacific. And it's a different type of threat. It's a different type of kind of deterrent that we look at from a whole of government approach. But what he did was he looked at our capability sets, and he saw that not that you have to reorganize to get better, but we were still organized how we did it like decades ago, which was great for a conflict and a threat base decades ago. But really, are we optimized for what we need to do now? So we started what you call the operational imperatives. Have anybody heard of those? Yeah, a couple people. So these were just things that operationally we had to get after in order to compete in a new technology space. And I'll rattle off. There were 7, they've unchanged, but the 7 operational imperatives that were started: space order of battle, obviously with the stand up of the Space Force, that's preeminent. Air advanced battle management system, or C3BM now as we call it. Basically targeting targeting engagement, which is long range kill chain. Air dominance, which is our new fighter profile. Resilient basing, kind of going across the island chains. Global strike, which is our new bomber. And then obviously readiness, which I think a lot of what we're doing here speaks to, as well as the resilient basing, thinking about what we will or won't have in different locations, and how do we get after maybe a Swiss Army knife human and a Swiss Army knife airman. We also started 4 cross-cutting operational enablers, because we found there were some things that really didn't fit neatly, but we still had to have. And that really, I think, highlighted the cross-cutting aspect of a lot of what we needed to get after. One of them was for weapons, which kind of speaks to the long-range kill chain, but then also the platforms that they will be sent from. Mobility, obviously getting around in a AOR that is 3 times the width of our entire nation in the US. Another one was electronic warfare. the spectrum is going to play an increasingly important role, both from the, terrestrial, the airborne, and the space element. Like, how are we weaving those together? And that kind of evolved into a very long acronym, which hopefully will change, but CC5 ISRT. So basically counter targeting. And then one was added last year, which really spoke to, I did the readiness one for a while. I've done the resilient basing because of the basically the affiliation with my portfolio. But last year I was also co-lead for training and test. Now we say that joint simulation environment is a test and training environment because test dictates the level of fidelity that system needs. You need a max viable product, not a min viable product for test. So we need to maintain JSC as a max viable product. However, we also need training for readiness. And how do we then use training and test things to improve our readiness in a way that doesn't decrement the test side, but really focuses on how dialable can you make your training things. And so we've been looking at that. Now, for all of these OIs, which have been going on for 3 years now, and the training and test, which is just 1 year old, there was an acquisition lead and an operational lead for each one of them. And it wasn't like, okay, operational lead, you have point, and then we'll follow you. Literally, the acquisition lead and the operational lead briefs the SecAF on all of these efforts. And in most cases, there's also an Air Force operational and acquisition lead and a Space Force operational acquisition lead. So this is not a side hobby. This is not a side gig. This has been a concerted effort across the Department of the Air Force to really figure out what are those capabilities. And so when we think about what we need for training, we've had to really rethink about this and come up with not just the blue, but the red, what type of exercises and kind of things do we need to work with the MAGCOMs, but then also the data. And has been mentioned AI, like where does this play? So that is all in the works. And so if I can just take another sidestep, Secretary of the Air Force also noted, we're getting after the capabilities, but are we really structured properly to enable our own success via our processes and our own bureaucracy? So recently at the last Air Force Association conference in February, they announced the reoptimization for great power competition, which is how are we getting after prioritizing integrated capabilities, horizontally integrated capabilities? And so we've worked through that. We have a number of recommendations that the Secretary and the team are working both at the Secretariat level, at the air staff level, and then out in the field via operations or acquisition. One of those is to pull all training things together. So my simulators division, training aircraft, legacy training aircraft that we work for our foreign partners, as well as what are the new things like JSE? What are the new training capabilities that we need to get after? What are the training that's being done on the earliest part of the spectrum at our Air Education and Training Command? And then how is it being woven and connected with the advanced high fidelity training that JSE is going to provide at our Warfare Center at Nellis? So we're trying to figure out both the spectrum of training and was mentioned earlier, I think that wasn't said, but kind of a Montessori school approach, like, hey, let's not restrain people. We need to figure out how we can recognize the competency has been built and then push people forward as opposed to saying, oh, we're on a lockstep track. So how do we increase speed that way? But then also on the fidelity of training from like your basic live fly all the way up to your virtual and constructive into an environment. So how do we look at that landscape, figure out what we have, and then what we can weave together that we already have versus creating new things? And then where is there a true gap? So that's kind of what my days have been spent doing. But at the same time, just speaking generally about training, some of the things that we think about in simulators. I don't know if you guys have had this experience, but if you're developing a capability and there's a financial constraint, what would normally get cut from the budget? And so, I think part of the challenge here is that you can't continue to decrement training and then pay for it later. If you're really talking about speed, You know, you can close the long range kill chain all day long and figure out all those systems you're going to weave together. But if you can't train people how to use those systems in concert, you've lost your speed. You've lost your kind of your element there. So, you know, one of the things that we're trying to now figure out is how do we understand what that trade space will be? Maybe if you're developing a new capability, maybe you need to accept that you will not get to your 100% until later. Maybe, you know, I'll say this because this is my advocacy. This is not anybody else's decision, but maybe you have to take an 80% solution in order to use 80% now. Otherwise, you have a 100% solution that maybe you can't use, you know, 50% because you haven't figured out how you're going to train to that and how you're going to quickly iterate or integrate that into a larger contested, congested environment. So these are the types of realities that are not very fun to, you know, address, because if you're in charge of developing a new fighter aircraft, you want to deliver that aircraft, and you want to deliver it with as much capability as has been asked. But then nobody actually can train on that variant of that aircraft, which is a problem. So you know, we're trying to get after concurrency is part of speed. Making sure that the training is in lockstep and is considered early is part of speed. Understanding also, as I've mentioned, obviously for this audience, you know, how do we get after in a better way, which I will admit, I've worked foreign sales a lot, worked cooperative partnerships, and it's always something that we don't want to think about because security is a challenge and we think it's going to slow us down. But in a conflict, it will speed us up. So these are the types of dialogues we need to continue to have with those particular you know, entities that can control the release and say, look, I get this is going to slow us down in the short term, but really if we get this in the field and our allies can't use it, the allies can't repair it, we don't have a network beyond our own US entities, then that's going to be a constraint. So that's another factor that, you know, we want to continue to look into and figure out how do we get after that better, especially on the training side for some of these high-end training environments, because it's not just going to be us that need to train in JSE. You know, there's going to be more instantiations of other coalition elements in that environment that we need to take into consideration and be able to train around. And then also, I think some of the things we've been dealing with our partners, industry partners, you know, we've had a big move towards open system architecture. I think in the modeling and simulation world, it's probably less of an issue because of the automatic standards that are inherent. But when you talk about the shift in business models, so companies have business models, and this is, you know, they have ways that they make their profit, and we need them to continue to make profit and maintain a good kind of foundation so they can remain robust partners. But we understand that some of these things with regard to data rights, open systems, flexibility, who owns the IP and who can see the IP, those remain challenges that we need to continue to work through with our industry partners. And then certainly last but not least, one of the main things that we're interested in is talent. So we can do certain things that we already have talent for. We can maybe up-train some of our existing workforce. If you guys are like us, we have a very broad demographic across our workforce. And we think about how we're going to up-train our existing workforce, and then how are we going to attract and retain new talent? You know, the new talent that we'll be getting from the universities, you know, if we don't continue to challenge them, their skills will be, you know, will age out within a number of years. So there's an ongoing challenge to figure out how do we in government and how do we partner with industry to continue to keep our talent fresh, at least a portion of our talent fresh in the government, and then always have a capability to reach across and get that talent from industry and academia. But this is a real challenge. When I'm talking about a near real-time physics-based environment like JSE, where am I getting that talent from? You know, where am I getting the people that are going to be writing those models that are going in there? And it could be on the contractor side from the platform to write an OFP, or it could be something that we need to do internally with regard to threat-based modeling. So that's that balance and making sure that we can sustain that level of talent to make these things a reality is a concern. It's something we definitely need to keep our eye on to figure out how do we continue to partner. And it's not just a one-time, it's got to be an ongoing feed and a flow back and forth with government and industry to make sure that we have the talent available. So I have no idea where I'm on my time. Perfect. Okay. So those are just a few things that are kind of top of our list right now across the Air Force. So I look forward to the, I think on my comments too, maybe, to my comments and being able to address any dialogue going on with you guys. And once again, thanks for having the American here. And I look forward to having some great discussions and seeing all the great things that Ready Nice and DSET have been able to accomplish over the past 9 years. Thanks.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Lea. And I have to say, you're not just here because of simulators, but because of all of that as well. So we're going to move swiftly on so that we can get to more comments shortly. Now, we have a familiar face in the room and actually someone that's really important to this community, especially if you're in the UK. And if you're familiar with DE&S and the procurement cycle, you'll know that we want to hear from Mr. Simon Pearce. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tess. Similarly to the previous two speakers, Chris and Lea, I'm going to talk predominantly about change. So there has been, what's the clicker? Been a lot of activity within DE&S at the moment, looking at how we better organize ourselves to increase productivity, to inject pace, to make sure that we deliver higher availability, more lethality, more resilience, and increased prosperity. As part of this, we started a journey about 18 months ago where we began by looking at what's wrong with DE&S, what are the problems that we need to address if we're going to make those previous points a reality. We came up with 7 problem and impact statements, having boiled everything down. Firstly, unrealistic funding and changeable defence programmes, leading to the defence enterprise being complicit in over-optimism in what we can deliver and inflated programmes which cause revised assumptions and further changes. Now, this isn't just a DE&S problem. These problems were categorised into things that DE&S could do and could fix themselves and things that were actually wider defence issues. So the first 4 wide defence issues. Second, lack of clarity on consistency across defence and on DE&S's specific role and what it needs from us. And DE&S does not understand what it owns and has responsibility for. Thirdly, prioritisation across defence is ineffective. Each of the frontline commands are very good at saying, here are their priority projects, this is number 1. Well, normally a number of number 1s rather than a single number 1. But when you're trying to prioritise across land, maritime, air, joint effects, it gets a lot more complicated and a lot more passion is involved in that conversation. Fragmented and disjointed end-to-end defence acquisition system causes friction and leads to wasted effort. Was problem number 4, again, a defence-wide issue. And then internally, DE&S has multiple and incoherent processes. Everywhere you go within the organisation, every time you move jobs, you'll find that the challenges and the processes that you're expected to use are different. And this is just an organisation of 10, 11,000 people, so it shouldn't be that hard to pull together some sort of coherent approach. Number 6 was the organisation structure is not optimised to deliver the required outputs efficiently, leading to reduced internal and external stakeholder satisfaction, and it's a reputational threat. And finally, DE&S doesn't manage and deploy its resources effectively. Having identified those 7, we then looked and said, actually, 4 of those we can't fix. So there was a piece to engage with defence design. So this is an ongoing piece of work. I think it came after the work in DE&S started and was sort of prompted by that approach. But defence has come up with this model, with a number of sub-boundaries. Sub-boundary 1, strategic direction, and the key purpose of the concept design is demonstrating how strategic outcomes are reached based on initial strategic direction. This is set from an understanding of the department's role in delivering national strategy, threats, contacts, and other external inputs. We then have design, integrate, and plan. This balances the tension between the other boundaries, such as multiple campaigns relying on the same finite capability, or balancing future requirements versus today. It also acts as the gearbox, ensuring effective synchronization across different cycle speeds of the other boundaries. Sub-boundary 3 was information, insight, and understand, with information cutting across every part of the model and informing key decisions made at each of the interfaces between boundaries. These decisions rely on the right data at the right time and are fundamental to the model's success. Sub-boundary 4 was campaigns, and campaigns are the powerhouse of the future design. They are broader than our current conception and might include everything from counter Russia to GCAP. Campaigns encompass all the activity that the department carries out to deliver strategic outcomes. Campaign owners are empowered to deliver their campaigns within set freedoms, constraints, and resources. And finally, enterprise services and capabilities. These resources to power campaigns are drawn from a pool of enterprise services generated within sub-boundary 5, including everything from commercial expertise to carrier strike groups, which are all built into multidisciplinary teams by the campaign owners. So with that, DE&S looked and said, actually, how do we fit into that model? So you can see there is a link between design, integrate, and plan, and what has been put together as the DE&S future structure. Our future structure is going to be based around 4 broad areas. Gateway, which provides a consistent interface for all of our clients for the first time, helping us make better decisions about solutions to military requirements and set up our projects for success. Core delivery, with about 8,500 people, is where the bulk of the work is done. Core is to deliver, the aim of Core is to deliver operational excellence with outputs delivered in a highly standardized way. Consistent outcomes regardless of the project. Here, we will also focus on driving up the availability of equipment. Systems integration works across DE&S to make sure that the equipment and systems and services that we deliver fit together as a whole to meet the overall needs of defence. And corporate supports and guides the whole organisation, providing essential strategy, planning and governance, as well as the shared businesses to support delivery. Looking at the model in more detail. So Gateway will engage with the single services earlier, so we understand precisely what is needed. We'll have more space to develop requirements, and we'll work alongside the services to proactively collaborate with allies, industry, DSTL, and Mod Head Office, and others earlier and more effectively, and by doing so, be able to mobilise the One Defence mindset. The Gateway builds in exportability from the start and will be in a stronger position to manage industry and the supply chain in a coordinated way. Because Gateway's teams help with early engagement, it supports better decision-making, making our partners, better decision-making with our mission partners, creates more robust plans and helps Defence deliver the right equipment and support with more pace, minimising unnecessary changes and delays. Core delivery integrates closely with Gateway. It gets the best out of the supply chain, driving in pace, leveraging automation, enabling spiral development and integration from the start with reduced bureaucracy and waste. 2 broad areas sit within core delivery: sustain and operate, which is the largest and focuses on delivering for our armed forces today, driving up availability of our equipment and ensuring that our kit is supported safely through life. Here we make sure the armed forces have what they need when they need it. In projects, our teams will focus on delivering defence equipment for tomorrow, which will provide greater standardisation and reliability. Work is commissioned into projects from Gateway when funded and prioritised by Defence, and we'll be clear with our mission partners on what can be realistically achieved to time and to cost. Systems integration works across DE&S to make sure that the equipment, systems and services that we produce fit together in a coherent way and meet the overall needs of Defence. And corporate supports and guides the whole organisation, providing strategy, planning and governance, as well as shared business services. So in core, we've grouped into what we call technology themes and environmental themes. So you can see coming down, lethality and protect, power propulsion auxiliaries, sense, communicate and decide, logistics and services. Logistics, services and commodities are all technology areas, and environments, land, air, maritime, space, multi-domain, synthetic environment and training. In delivering a capability, such as a frigate, you will look to each of those potential areas. Oh, drop one. So we'll see here that a new frigate coming into service will need elements from logistics and services, sense, decide and communicate, power and propulsion, lethality and protection. DE&S's future executive leadership team is shown there. Some names that some of you may recognise. But again, I'll move on from that one because I've covered. Oh. So Gateway is going to be structured as shown here. 2-star strategic capability engagements and ops. A 2-star heading up a commissioning area, and a 2-star heading up project initiation, all of which will drive taking projects and work on in the most sort of coherent and joined up way. Then moving into core delivery, you can see that we have the environments on the left-hand side of that slide. So land, air fixed wing, air rotary and UAS, maritime, and multi-domain synthetic environments and training. And the technologies to the right, 2-star lethality and protection, sense, decide and communicate, logistics services and commodities, and power propulsion and auxiliaries. All of which will be headed up by Director General Simon Dakin. So how will the new model benefit our suppliers? Well, we'll have earlier sharing of. Sorry, 1 second. Oh, I should have dropped it. Yeah, it probably is. Earlier sharing of military intent and future capabilities. There'll be a coordinated route into DE&S with key account managers and dedicated points of contact. Alignment with standards with standard environments and technologies that much better support our supply base. There'll be a greater focus on export opportunities and dual-use technologies, and also on international partnerships. We're looking to help speed up decisions on new capabilities so our armed forces get solutions to the front line faster. We're looking to support clear prioritization to make sure resources are focused on the right areas and on agreed priorities, and reduce the unnecessary variability in the acquisition process. So single route in, a single process every time you deal with DE&S. Built-in integration and spiral development from the start of every project through a single consistent process that allows for upgrade and incremental delivery. Greater collaboration along the whole equipment life cycle, and a new delivery envelope, including whole life costs. I think something we've aspired to do in the past, but never quite got to. And safe to operate, built into projects from the outset. As General Chris was saying, this is one of the key elements to running the defence enterprise. In terms of managing the transition, we've got to a place now where we've gone through the design of each of those sort of sub-elements, and we're now starting to transition into those new structures. Gateway has already been stood up, and we're starting the transition from project teams into core delivery in July of this year. As you can see on the slide, ships are going first, with transition commencing in July. Corporate and SE will move across in October of this year, and then land will transition in November. Finally, we expect air to transition sometime towards moody lighting. Air transitioning sometime towards the start of the next calendar year. Systems integration implementation is underway, and systems integration will be stood up in October of this year. and corporate also stood up at the beginning of July in order to support the transition to call. I think that just says in words what I've covered on the slide. And again, the same picture. So what's our offer? Our offer and ask. We offer improved pace in decision making, a visible drive to value your time and your input, greater transparency and dialogue, greater consistency and clarity. We offer more effective programs delivered at pace. We offer earlier involvement in capability development and requirement setting, and a more consistent and coordinated route into DE&S for new and existing products and services. The ask from industry is to help our teams simplify processes and reduce variation, to embrace and promote new behaviours and ways of working, and to commit to positive partnerships across all of the new programmes. One thing I did forget to mention given we're at a training and simulation show, it would be remiss of me not to cover off. So right in the middle of the diagram there, you can see a one-star multi-domain synthetic environment and training. That is where the bulk of the training and simulation projects have been mapped. So all of the TSSP projects map into that one-star area. Also, MCAST is mapped into that area, as well as I think 4 projects for SAST also come into that one-star area. So for the first time, we have a single focus within DE&S for training and simulation. Probably the key point that I shouldn't have neglected given the audience. DE&S are after feedback. So if anybody would like to comment or has any questions that they'd like to raise on the DE&S transition, there's a QR code there that will lead you to a survey. Please scan away and feel free to add any comments you wish. Thank you very much. Thanks, Tess.
Yeah, the lighting changed. I've always said DE&S needs a bit more romance in its life. So there we go, we've provided. Just before our final speaker, I have a couple of notes for you. So we have got an app for you to actually ask questions through. There are people online who'll be asking questions through the Q&A. If you don't know how to find that, you can go into your program and there's a page, you can just download the app and work from there. So that saves people running around with microphones. Talking of people running around with microphones, there's a lot of unsung heroes here this week. And just to talk to Leah's point about bringing in that talent, there's lots of young people walking around. You'll see beeping your badges, supporting you and showing you around. These are our students, our DSET interns of the week, and we are actually putting them up and accommodating them. We've got 30 that we're paying to support this week. So please engage with them. They're from universities from all over the world, and they are absolutely fantastic. There is one more unsung hero, so I'll give him a shout out, even though I know he's on holiday this week, and that is Major Neil Donachie, who's SO2 Modernise for strategic engagement and plans. He is the let's say, the soul that had to reauthorize all of our UK speakers this week, and we had 72 hours to do it. So can we give a big cheer for Neil? He'll see it when he gets the recording. Right, to our final speaker this morning, I would like to introduce Mr. Pete Morrison. Before I do, I'd also like to extend our thanks again to Bohemia Interactive for being our tech sponsor this year. All of the online engagement and the hybrid event wouldn't be able to happen without Bohemia's ongoing support. So thank you, Pete. Come and chat.
All right, thank you very much, Tess. Good morning, everybody. I'm Pete Morrison. I've been working in the milsim industry now for about 20 years. Most of that time I've been working on computer games for military training, but I'm not going to talk about that today. I was going to talk about wargaming, but Tess reminded me that half of you are wargaming experts, and I don't want to show my ignorance. So the best way for me to use, I think, the next 10 minutes or so is for me to play the part of the technologist on the panel. And quite simply, I'm going to predict the future. Now, one of the best things about being a technologist is that I get to use, and if I could have my slides, please. I get to use funky AI-generated images, and I'm going to use a lot of them. I'm actually aiming to set the record for the most AI-generated images used in any presentation potentially ever. So strap yourself in. Now, contrary to popular belief, it's very easy to predict the future. The challenge is getting it right. I'm going to try and do that today. Now, we've seen some massive upsets in the past decade or so, things that we never expected. We saw that social media, for example, made us all dumber, potentially sowed the seeds for the fall of our civilization. We saw VR gaming basically fail, and this was contrary to what industry wanted. But here in the military simulation world, we've seen a number of step changes that will change the way that we need to simulate warfare going forward. Today, I'm going to focus on artificial intelligence. I'm going to focus on the rapidly evolving nature of drone warfare and the ready availability of terrain data and the ability to rapidly update that data as the situation on the ground changes. So I'm going to be focusing on these three areas. Now, this is not comprehensive, of course, but as Sam Altman has said, a key to leveling up in life is speaking concisely. So that's what I'm going to aim to do. Now, does anyone in here not know who Sam Altman is? Okay, well, you're a bunch of nerds. Look at you. A couple of people have been living under a rock. We're going to send you to mandatory AI re-education. And Tess, can you take their names? Now, Sam Altman is the founder of OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, and he's responsible for much of the hype around AI at the moment. But does it justify the hype? The first thing to understand about generative AI, and this is the step change, generative AI, is that it's not actually doing magic. It is super clever, but these reinforcement learning algorithms are not new. What's changed is the availability of massive amounts of computing power and the ability of companies like ChatGPT to employ thousands, if not tens of thousands of humans to train the models. Now, for the simulation world, generative AI shows promise, but in the short term, it will be limited to synthesizing large data sets of images and text. Think about reading in doctrine and asking questions of the AI to understand that doctrine better. Summarize this for me, please. Now, in the simulation community, we can imagine all the things very easily that generative AI could do for us, from creating a scenario based upon simple verbal input. I get told all the time that our product is too hard to use. This could be a way to solve that. Or creating ultra-realistic op-4 behavior in a tactical training game, right? We can imagine these things. But this is probably very far off because these are very niche use cases, and generative AI will continue to evolve as kind of needed by the masses. It's very similar to computer games, right? It seems like a fairly easy lift to take Call of Duty Modern Warfare and apply it to military training. But it's actually a really heavy lift. And I would know, having kind of doing this for 20 years, you can't just pick up a computer game and use it for training. It's similar with artificial intelligence. Militaries will need to work together to drive investment in generative AI for military simulation use. And significant investment and innovation will be required. DARPA acknowledged this in their recent AI Forward initiative, stating that despite progress in the field, AI still requires significant investment and advancement to meet the most pressing national security needs. Now, without a doubt, machine learning will dramatically change the nature of war. Drones right now require a human operator and a good signal between the control unit and the platform. Drones will soon be fully autonomous. They'll be smaller, capable of navigation without GPS, and they'll be deadly. While NATO forces might have qualms about a machine making a kill or no-kill decision, our adversaries will not. The winner may not be the side with the best training or equipment, but that with the ability to churn out the most reliable drones that can find and blow up anything that is human. And the technology has moved very, very quickly. I don't need to say a lot to explain this video. What you're seeing here is a swarm of autonomous drones moving through a dense forest. Now, when you're operating in jungle, You have a canopy to protect you from UAVs and satellite reconnaissance, but these things will come and find you and blow you up. And here's a video of just one encounter between a drone and an unfortunate Russian soldier in Ukraine. I know it's a bit grainy, but you can basically see this soldier absolutely terrified, trying to outmaneuver a drone that's controlled by a Ukrainian operator. We must very quickly employ simulation to develop tactics to counter this type of threat. Should this soldier be carrying an EMP, like in the Matrix? Should they have a shotgun? I don't know if any of you have gone skeet shooting. Maybe everyone needs to carry a shotgun. Or should they have a ballistic shield, right? We need answers to these questions, and we need them very, very quickly. Ukraine has given us a window into the future of warfare, and it doesn't look good for the infantry soldier. Arguably, it never did, which is why I was in Signals Corps. Finally, we cannot overlook the importance of accurate terrain to underpin both training and operations. Now, terrain data is not as sexy as artificial intelligence or drones, but it's a requirement for both. A drone will match the terrain that it sees through its sensor with the terrain in its memory in order to operate without GPS, right? Really important to understand that. These drones are going to operate independently. They do need no connection to any operator, and it's a real threat. So already the air and space above Ukraine is filled with platforms taking millions of photos in the air and in space, which are reconstructed into 3D terrain environments at ever-increasing resolutions. We have the technology to rapidly take this 3D data and rebuild entire theatres in hours, with the position of every trench and crater accurately recreated at high resolution. These terrain problems have been solved. Now, I remember back in 2005 when I was part of the simulation team to support Australians deploying to Iraq, we had to build the town of Samoa by hand. It took us 6 months, recreating points of interest from photographs to enable the training team to conduct mission rehearsal from the airfield to the forward operating base, basically convoy drills. Now, all of this data can be auto-generated, and it just gets better every day. Who here has heard of Gaussian splatting? Ooh, impressive. So Gaussian splatting is one of the new techniques for taking effectively a point cloud generated from video captured by drones or even an iPhone camera and recreating ultra-realistic 3D scenes. And it's applicable both at ground level and, of course, at any altitude. And so what we're seeing is this photorealistic 3D data for entire countries is now available for you for mission planning and simulation. And you need to take advantage of this data. Now, the prices are still high, right? But this will come down as the number of suppliers increase, and you'll start flying your own platforms to collect your own data in theatre. But this type of terrain data is simply going to be mandatory to win in future conflicts. So now I'm going to wrap up with some predictions, and you can hold me to these. I'm a technologist. You can trust me. That's if I ever get invited back. Now, these predictions, will definitely come true. So first off, I predict, maybe controversially, that generative AI is going to plateau. Now, that's a controversial take, given all the money that NVIDIA are making right now, for example. But the models will get better. But by this, I mean that they will make less mistakes. They will hallucinate less. They'll be able to accept larger data sets. So we're definitely going to see that, to be able to synthesize more data. Generative AI for military use will increase incrementally, directly proportional to your investment in it. There's a chance for breakthroughs. I mean, what we all want is the omnipresent AI advisor that sits on the shoulder at every commander at every echelon, right? That's what we need to kind of get to. You can imagine course of action analysis in theatre, in real time, and the force multiplier that would provide. I do believe that we are currently seeing the breakthrough in autonomous drones. I actually suspect it's already happened in the US and China, and we just haven't heard about it. In future, mass production of autonomous drones will be as important as the mass production of ammunition, maybe even more so. So I cannot stress enough how important it is to invest in innovation in AI and drones. This will be a new arms race, and it has already started. And finally, a little bit of a tangent, but still important, We will soon see a headset that's acceptable for soldiers to wear in combat. It won't look as dumb as this one. That's the AI's fault, by the way, not mine. But the ability for the soldier in the trench to have a direct feed from the drone that's flying 100 feet above is going to be a massive force multiplier. It will simply make the soldiers more lethal. Right now, the drone operator has to speak to the soldier in the trench by radio, which is good, but not best. So we are going to see continued investment. IVAS in the US has hit a few roadblocks, but the investment will continue, and I do believe that this is going to happen. And bonus prediction, I predict that AI-generated images will continue to be overused in presentations like this one. This is what AI thinks I look like. My wife says there's too much hair. I agree. And that's the end of my talk. I hope you found it interesting. I look forward to debating these topics, and you can ask me as many questions as you like. I might take all the questions by the sound of it. And back to you, Tess.
Right. Whilst I invite our guests to come and join me on the panel, I just want to also tell the people who weren't here yesterday about the Serious Games Simulation and Wargaming Centre that Ruddy and Ice and DSET is opening in Salisbury. So taking one piece from each of our speakers, Chris is building something that's greater than the sum of its parts. We're going to be able to do DSET all year round. It's going to be a collaborative, innovative hub for all of you and for all of us as a community to use. Getting that horizontal integration that Lea Kirkwood talked about and making sure that we're there right at the beginning and that early engagement piece that Simon and the DE&S team needs. And finally, Gaussian Splatting was the name of the rock band I was in at college, so I think that's where it came from. Right, questions, please.
Good morning. Firstly, thank you very much to all of our speakers for really insightful first lectures this morning. So I have a couple of questions, if I may. The first was around, I think many of you have mentioned about skills and competencies from either your reviews or things that you've been looking into. What has surprised you about some of those reviews and what you've been analysing about what skills and competencies you might need and what are potentially going to be struggling to find in the future? And then a slightly different question, but related. We have talked about skills and competencies. Many of our organizations are quite well established and have long histories. What kind of values and belief systems do you think that need to evolve going forwards to be fit for the future that we're discussing today and going forwards? Thank you.
So Jerry, you got feedback. Is that better? Yeah, okay. So I'm going to take that question is directed at me, correct? So that the rest of the panelists can comment should they want to. So Pete, you can go first because Bohemia's been going a while now.
Yeah, I mean, the values and beliefs, that's an interesting question. I mean, I hope they're the same that they've always been. And, you know, I am quite critical of the attitude in some of our countries right now that don't really appreciate how hard we've fought for what we have. And so, yeah, I would certainly hope to see that that kind of stays a focus, if that makes sense. And I think we all need to work on that.
Cool. Lea.
When you start talking about that, the first thing that came to mind is something that, you know, we're getting ready to embark on in earnest is, you know, the values and beliefs, as I mentioned, is, you know, change is the constant. Understanding how where each of us currently is in our technology awareness and our readiness is not enough, you know, and so I don't think that, part of me thinks I'm not getting to your question, but this just makes me think all the more about, you know, how we're trying to steer our workforce, how we're trying to navigate a multi-generational workforce with really a lot of things that some of them just are not comfortable with. And how are we coming to value the technology in a new way that probably maybe some of the other older generations are have not had to embrace in the past, but now we have to, and we have to convince them that this type of skill set and values for the technology and the evolution of technology needs to continue to move forward. That's what I think about, the values and kind of how we look at the technology and where we need to be and continue to move towards. And that I think applies to everybody in all skill sets, and even the ones we probably aren't tracking right now.
So definitely not on values. That is way too loaded a question, although I can understand why you've asked the question. It's pertinent to the debate. But I do want to make a comment on competencies and what has taken me by surprise. So the trope is that everything is more complicated and therefore must be harder to train. And I used to believe that, but actually it isn't. It's easier to use an iPhone than it is to use a 350 HF radio. And that's because it's been designed to be easy to use. And we don't pay enough attention to that opportunity. The second thing is that the skill levels in the people we are recruiting are ever higher. So their ability to absorb technology or to absorb complexity is greater. And the third thing is that learning and development solutions, such as wargaming, and there are others, simulation, also can accelerate that competency journey. So the idea that a piece of kit needs, 15 different courses with a photo and a run ashore at the end of it, I think isn't the default setting. And as an example, we went to visit a reserve platoon training on a training area in the southwest, right? So they're doing the thing that they think I want to see, which is attacking a building, right? So they do a great job. They're a great bunch of people, put in a fast ball position, put in an FUP, assault the building, brilliant. But it's the only building on that training area. And if you were in Ukraine, you would be dead already. The moment you consolidate on that building, you'd be dead, right? And they know that. And then when I ask them how many of them have a private drone license, the answer is 5. If I ask this a group of 30. So they have the competencies already. And what we've got to create is a learning and development model that exploits that doesn't suppress that. And that is very evident in land training system. How do we create a learning and development methodology that actually plays to those advantages rather than ignore them? And when I think about the sort of technologies that will support that methodology, and much of which is around the table here, and Simon and Lea have both talked about it, and Peter as well, and great presentations, by the way, I really enjoyed them all. Then I think, okay, now we've got a methodology. How do we resource it in a way that makes that competency development as fast as possible, meets those challenges that all of the other 3 speakers have described?
One of the things actually this week you'll be aware of is we've got the analysis, modelling and simulation course, and it's talking to that speed. We were challenged by this community last year, and there isn't external to defence a way of getting the SQEP that we need for this space super fast. So Oxford Brookes University, we have to thank them as well. If they're in the room with DSET, the R&D centre, they've managed to stand up this course that we're putting on this week. Got 20 people from military, government, industry and academia, all training to be certified in this in 5 days. So it can be done, but there does need to be a will, and the agility comes from authority. Your thoughts on that, Pete?
Yeah, I mean, the people that we are recruiting from the technology arena right now are incredibly high caliber, incredibly smart, and by and large kind of understand the mission. So I guess it goes back to that values and beliefs question. We fall into a trap as product developers in the military simulation space of kind of relying on this crutch. we kind of know that your administrators are happy doing a training course. And sometimes we don't build things to be easy to use. And so there's a lesson to be learned there, I think.
I'm just going to ask Lea for any final thoughts before we come on to some of our own social value pieces.
Just real briefly, so one of the big things that, another thing we've really tried to focus on is why. You know, we can try to attract new talent, and we can try to convince, you know, my mother that an iPhone and doing, you know, finance online is going to be easier, but I will never convince her of that. It's just how she is. Okay, so there's a lot of us, and we need all of us, multi-generational, to input into the decision space, because we're going to get better decision making out of that. But at the same time, you know, how can we convince them to gravitate towards the technology, because it's not natural from what they're used to. And it is a change management thing, but I don't know that me telling them they have to do it is enough. You know, I think that part of the thing we have to continually focus on is giving them the information and giving them the why. Showing them this is the space. You may not realize that your purchasing power parity has, you know, decreased by X% in your lifetime, but it has, because they live where they are. They live local. And so understanding, how do we get the people that aren't on the forward edge, that are closer to the blunt end, how do they get them to feel things towards the front in a very personal way, and understand the implications of the larger geopolitical, the whole of government aspect, to say, no, we need you to understand this, because this technology is going to help somewhere else that is not where you live, but is where all of us need to be watching. So
Thank you. Right. We always run out of time, and I know that you'd love to hear more from our wonderful speakers today, and you can definitely engage with them because they're here, and we have I'm not going to whisk them away, I'm sorry to say, behind some red rope. You've got to mix with everybody, so they'll be accessible. Now, one of the things that actually worked really well last year, and we would like to continue this year, is giving the awards out at the end of sessions rather than trying to fit it in amongst the beers, because you never chuff and listen. There will be plenty of time for beers later. Now, I'm going to invite Mr. Razmat Ahmed to come up and help me do this presentation. Now, this was going to be a Lifetime Achievement Award that you can see in your program. Unfortunately, that person cannot be with us today. So what we are doing is we're actually switching it out for our DSET Intern of the Year award. Now, this person doesn't know they're receiving it. This person was also nominated by the last recipient of that, Mr. Sam Cullimore, who's doing our Tech and Serious Games lead. And he said this person has gone above and beyond in the support of the Next Gen team, in the subcommittee, engaged with both his university and his new employer. So now, if he doesn't know that it's about him, he will do now. Could you please welcome Mr. Corey Meir to receive this award?
Cheers, thank you very much. Cheers, thank you.
So Corey's just started this week at RBSL, haven't you, as well? And his bosses are actually on holiday, and I told them they're very excited, so we get all the pictures. Would you like to say anything?
I don't know what to say. Thank you, I guess. I actually don't know what to say.
No, that's cool. You can do it later on. All right. Thanks very much. Yeah, after the beer. Right. Okay. Do that later. Right. So that's what we're all about. Our social values are Esto Benignus, Esto Fortis, which is be kind and be brave. I'm going to thank you all very much and have a wonderful show. We've got so much coming up this week, and we will catch up with you after the break with Future Frontiers. Thank you.